His position ahead of trade negotiations with the EU. Joining us to discuss this from central London is the Foreign Secretary, Dominic Raab. But I just want to start, if it's OK, Mr Raab, with the news this morning that a small group of Britons who didn't make it onto that first evacuation flight from Wuhan, the city at the centre of the coronavirus outbreak, are now understood to be returning to the UK. What more can you tell us about that?
Well, of course, we had the first flight on Friday with 83 UK nationals returning to the UK, 41 others, including Europeans. And it's a good example of how, even though we're leaving the EU, we'll still continue a lot of that important cooperation. And it's correct that there is a further French flight that is expected back in Europe today, and that will carry some UK nationals. And I'm very grateful for the cooperation that we've had, first of all, with the Spanish Foreign Minister, but also the French authorities. And as I said, it's a good example of how, even though we're leaving the EU, we'll be cooperating with our friends and partners very effectively.
Can you confirm how many British nationals are on that flight, and also why they weren't on the first flight that the UK put on?
Well, I can't confirm the precise number. We'll see as they come into the UK. But the challenge has been immense. You'll know that the Hubei province is 9 times the size of Wales. We had a job to do to get the permissions for the charter flight going in, then the permissions to get the roadblocks eased for the UK nationals to get to the muster points. We had 4 coaches put on, and we delayed the original flight by 3 hours on the tarmac to try and make sure as many people could get out that wanted to get out. And obviously, as this flight with the French shows, we'll continue to work for those that didn't make the first flight to give them the cooperation, the support and the reassurance that we can help them as best we can.
And what will happen to these people when they do reach the United Kingdom? Are they coming into Brize Norton?
Well, they'll go to the Arrow Park facility and all of the protections, the support that they need for the 14-day period will be put in place. So they'll be treated very well. And of course, the reason we need to do that is, on the one hand, we want to get the UK nationals that want to leave China out. On the other hand, we need to make sure we control and prevent the spread of the coronavirus because of the implications that that would have. So that's the approach and the plan that we've put in place. And we've obviously been working with all of the NHS authorities and the Department of Health and the Health Secretary.
OK, thank you for that update. I'm keen to move on to Brexit because, of course, this is our first show now that we have officially left the European Union. And Boris Johnson's going to be giving a speech tomorrow where he's going to be setting out some of his priorities ahead of those trade talks. We're expecting him to say there'll be no alignment and no concessions. What does that actually mean? I mean, are we going to be following any EU rules?
Well, this is a great crossroads moment. We're leaving the EU. It's a moment for renewal, a moment for change. We're excited about the opportunities of Brexit, but also the wider agenda to level up the country. That's why we're in the northeast for Cabinet on Friday. And in relation to what the Prime Minister will set out, I mean, the reality is we've got a deal with the EU. It sets out the political declaration for the future relationship, and the points you made are well known. We're taking back control of our laws, so we're not going to have high alignment with the EU, legislative alignment with their rules, but we'll want to cooperate, and we expect the EU to follow through on their commitment to a Canada-style free trade agreement, and that's what we're pursuing. And there's a great opportunity here for win-win. We're leaving, departing the EU, but it's a point of departure, not the point of arrival. There are huge opportunities with our EU friends, but also global opportunities. And I'll be travelling to Asia, to Australia, to Japan, to Singapore next week because of those as well.
Just to focus again on the briefing around the Prime Minister's speech, no alignment, no concessions. I mean, it seems pretty clear that the government is prioritising sovereignty over its own laws and rules, over frictionless trade, access potentially to the market. I mean, what this means is custom checks at the border and paperwork for business, isn't it?
No, I don't think so. But look, if you look at things like regulation, I don't think we should be defensive about it. When it comes to the minimum wage, when it comes to maternity leave, when it comes to environmental protections, for example, the restrictions here in the UK on single-use plastic, our regulations and our standards are higher. But I can reassure our EU friends and partners, we will not be insisting that they align with our rules as a price of a free trade deal with the UK. That's not the way free trade deals are done globally, and I'm sure that the EU will want to adhere to their commitment to a Canada-style, best-in-class free trade agreement, and there's great opportunity there on all sides.
I mean, clearly you can say that it's a price worth paying for sovereignty, but I think it's important to be honest about what not aligning with the EU means. It does mean custom checks at the border, doesn't it? And it does mean paperwork for business.
But the EU's been very clear about this. We've got the deal. You can examine the terms. It's not my word or anyone else's word. And the commitment is to avoid all of those things with a best-in-class free trade agreement. And I'm sure, and we're committed to it on our side, and I'm sure the EU will want to stay committed to the undertakings that they've made. That's what we expect. That's what negotiations are all about.
But if you're not aligning with the EU, then that does mean checks, it does mean paperwork, it does mean bureaucracy, it does mean cost for business, and frankly, it probably means job losses as well.
Well, it would be, I think, a step backwards by the EU in terms of the undertakings they've made, but we've been clear. It'll either be a Canada-style best-in-class free trade agreement or something looser, like the Australians have this 2008 economic partnership framework. But our commitment, the agreement that we made with the EU, was to avoid all of that, and I'm sure that they'll want to live up to the undertakings they've made, just as we'd expect to do the same. And the political declaration, if you look at it, it's very clear that we would maintain democratic control over our regulations. Of course, there are global standards that we entirely expect to live up to, and as I said, we expect to be a leader in environmental standards and workers' rights. And of course, unemployment in the UK is half the level it is in the Eurozone, so we shouldn't be defensive about this. And I'm sure there'll be some posturing on the EU side, but actually there's a great opportunity for a win-win deal. We've got the political declaration, and I think all sides should put the meat on the bones, if you like, to get that done. That was the understanding when we did the deal, the withdrawal agreement, and I think all sides should live up to it.
I wonder if I can detect a bit of frustration on your behalf directed at the EU. We're told that the government's privately infuriated with the EU for apparently changing the terms of the deal. What exactly does that mean? Are you angry?
We'll keep our cool during these negotiations. I think we've learnt a lot from the experience of the deal that we've done on the withdrawal agreement. But what we're not going to do is have the same dynamic where we're told that there are red lines that must shift and this, that and the other. The issue of alignment, the one that you've raised with me, is just not going to happen. It's not a question of being red lines, it's not on the negotiating table, it's not even in the negotiating room. And that was the common understanding that we signed the withdrawal agreement, and we said, and it was Donald Tusk, Michel Barnier said to me that once we'd sorted out the Northern Ireland Protocol, once we got the withdrawal agreement, the offer by the EU was a Canada Plus style agreement. Well, obviously, we expect them to live up to those commitments. So I don't think it's a question of frustration. We will hold them to account for the undertakings they've made, and we'll live up in good faith and with a good spirit of optimism, of goodwill to get that deal done.
I wonder if there's an issue, though, in the terms of the relative sides of the UK and the EU. Leo Varadkar, the Irish Prime Minister, said this week the UK has yet to come to terms with the fact it's now a small country. He went on to say that the EU's got a population and a market much bigger than the UK's. So if these were two teams up against each other playing football, who do you think has the stronger team? Is he right?
I think Leo Varadkar is in the midst of a shall I say, very competitive election in Ireland, and I'm not going to interfere in Irish politics, and I'd probably suggest that he wants to refrain from doing the same. Actually, we've got a good bilateral relationship with the Irish. We've just worked together really well to restore the Northern Ireland Assembly and the Executive. That's really important. I'm sure all of that cooperation will continue. And for the UK as a whole leaving the EU, it's, as I said, a point of departure, not the point of arrival, but we're excited. This is about bringing the country together now. We want some unity going forward, and it's about the optimism and the ambition of what and as a nation and as a country and all the nations of the United Kingdom can achieve. And we're not going to apologise about being optimistic for the future.
We'll be talking to Arlene Foster a little later on the show, the First Minister in Northern Ireland. If you don't want alignment with the EU, that's going to mean custom checks in the Irish Sea. It's going to mean issues for Northern Ireland, isn't it? Is it right to be upfront with people?
Well, no, because of the deal we've done with the EU. We've ended the risk of all of those worst-case scenarios, all those disruptions. We want to make sure that, and I'm sure they will, the Irish and the EU will live up to the commitments they've made, and we're committed to it. And, of course, Northern Ireland will leave the EU with the United Kingdom, will avail itself of not just the seamless trade with the UK, but with the rest of the EU, and will have the opportunity to be part of the global free trade agreements we're doing. And as I said at the outset, I'm going to be off next week to Asia, to Australia, to Japan, to Singapore and to Malaysia. And there are huge opportunities for all quarters of the United Kingdom with the liberal, energetic and ambitious approach to free trade we're going to do. And that's good for, remember, the businesses in this country.
I just want to
consumers, it means more choice.
I just want to come back on the issue of checks.
Agenda.
I just want to come back on the issue of checks, because if the UK decides to diverge, if you don't want to align with the EU, there will be checks. I'm not saying whether that's right or wrong, whether it is a price worth paying or not, but it's just worth being upfront with people, isn't it?
No, it's directly in conflict, not just with the withdrawal agreement, but the undertakings in the political declaration. So, of course, we expect those assurances and those agreements to be kept to. That's why we've done this deal. It's a package. But the point I was making is I think we need to put the relationship that the UK has with the EU in the wider context of the agenda that we've got.
So when Michel Barnier says there will be checks...
That's really important.
He's wrong.
That's really important, but so are the global opportunities, particularly in the Asia-Pacific region. Massive growth opportunity for the United Kingdom.
Just to talk about checks, though, so when Michel Barnier says there will be checks, he's wrong, is he?
Yes.
Okay.
He's wrong if the EU lives up to its commitments on its side, both in the withdrawal agreement but also the political declaration.
Now, according to the Sunday Times, you've ordered British diplomats to sit separately from their EU counterparts at international summits. I just wonder, because on foreign policy, it feels to me as if the UK has got a very similar position on most of the major issues to our EU allies, whether it's Huawei, the Iran nuclear deal, policy in the Middle East. Is this about posturing rather than policy?
No, it's simply, for example, in the WTO, we'll have separate independent membership. Of course, we'll assert the UK position robustly, ambitiously and optimistically. But you're quite right, we'll continue to cooperate with our European partners and friends. And whether it's on the Iran nuclear deal and triggering the dispute resolution mechanism, which I cooperated very closely with my French and German opposite numbers, or in relation to the coronavirus flights coming back, and I've cooperated very closely with the French authorities and my Spanish opposite number. Of course, all of that cooperation will continue, but we will speak for the UK people and for the UK interest, just as other members of the WTO or other organisations do. So I think that's natural. That's exactly what people expected as we leave the EU, and I think it can be done not in an adversarial way, but in a confident and ambitious way.
OK, now I just want to move on to the case of Harry Dunn, the teenage motorcyclist killed in a road accident. The woman who the police wanted to charge with his death, the driver, has fled to the US claiming diplomatic immunity. Now, you met with the US Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, this week. Did you raise this case with him, and what did you say?
Oh, yes, I did. And in fairness, Mike Pompeo, at a policy exchange event, which all the media came to, talked about it as well. And we made it very clear, and on behalf of the UK, we want to see justice for Harry Dunn and his family. We think Anne Sakoulas needs to come back and face justice. And we're committed to the arrangements being put in place to make sure that kind of case can never happen again. And as we've always said, we've got a good relationship with our American friends and allies, and we'll always talk honestly about these issues because they're incredibly important. And I, of course, met the Dunn family in advance of that meeting because I want them to have confidence that we're taking up this case and all the aspects of it in the candid way that they would expect.
I mean, you sound very calm talking about this, but so far the US has just blithely ignored all our requests and entreaties on behalf of the family of this dead teenage boy. The Dunn family said recently, a spokesperson for the Dunn family said that you're incandescent with rage over the case. Are you angry?
No, we are frustrated with this. I want to see justice for...
Are you frustrated or angry?
Well, I'll choose my own words carefully, and obviously I met with the family, and I totally understand the acute frustration that they feel. There are two aspects. There's the case, and we want Anne Sakoulas to come back, and the Home Office and the CPS have put in the extradition request, so that track is there, and we're obviously pursuing that. At the same time, there are a whole range of measures that we want to put in place to make sure that a case like this can never happen again, and we're pushing rigorously on behalf of the family, but also other people in this country who would expect us to do that.
And then just finally, we are looking at HS2, the high-speed rail link, a little later on the show. We've got a report that will be showing. We're expecting a decision on that soon from the government. Boris Johnson appeared to let slip earlier this week to a 10-year-old on Sky's FYI children's programme that potentially construction was going to keep going. He said, in a hole the size of HS2, the only thing to do is to keep digging. So should we be reading into that the government's about to give HS2 the green light?
Well, as you say, we've got a review underway. We're looking at all of the aspects to it in terms of value for money, but the connectivity, the crucial issue about making sure that the north is joined up and can tap into all the opportunities. And I'm not going to prejudice or preempt the decision that we made formally shortly.
OK, Dominic Raab, thank you very much for being on the programme this morning.
Nice to talk to you.